Complete story production. The champagne flute on Corinne Bellamy's tray was trembling. She told herself it was because the tray was overloaded. 12 crystal glasses filled too close to the rims, the way the hotel's event coordinator had insisted. Not because of the 500 people packed into the Grand Monarch Hotel ballroom. Not because the chandelier light was so bright it made the sweat on her forehead feel like a spotlight. Not because every woman in the room was wearing a dress that cost more than her rent for a year. Corinne moved along the edge of the crowd in her white server's blouse and dark green apron, keeping her eyes on the tray. That was the trick Aunt Lorraine had taught her years ago. Watch the glasses, not the guests. The guests don't see you anyway. The Prescott Foundation Charity Gala was the biggest event of the Atlanta social season. $600,000 had been raised before dessert. The ballroom smelled like gardenias and expensive perfume, and a string quartet played something soft near the stage. Corinne had been on her feet since 4 in the afternoon. It was nearly 10 o'clock now, and her lower back ached, and she still had 3 hours of nursing school reading waiting on her kitchen table. She paused near a marble column and scanned the room for empty glasses to collect. That was when the tall blonde woman in the white gown stepped onto the stage. The music stopped. A hush rolled through the crowd like a wave. Corinne recognized the woman from the society pages. Felicity Hargrove. Her face had been on the front of Atlanta Scene magazine twice this year. She was the kind of woman who moved through a room like the room had been built for her, and tonight she was smiling as if she held a secret the whole world wanted. Felicity took the microphone from the event host with a graceful hand. "I know we're here tonight for a wonderful cause," she said. Her voice was warm and practiced. "But I hope you'll all forgive me for adding one more reason to celebrate." Corinne's gaze drifted to the front of the crowd. A tall man in a navy suit was standing near the stage. Even from 30 feet away, she could see his jaw tighten. His gray-blue eyes were fixed on Felicity, and something in his expression looked less like anticipation and more like alarm. "Most of you know Julian Prescott," Felicity continued. "And most of you know how close we've become this past year." A murmur rippled through the guests. Corinne saw people turning toward the man in the navy suit. Julian Prescott. The name was printed on every program, every banner, every napkin in the room. CEO of Prescott Industries. The man who had written the check for the foundation. "What you don't know," Felicity said, her smile widening, "is that Julian and I are going to make our relationship official. Tonight." She paused for the reaction. It came in a chorus of gasps, applause, and the sharp clicks of phone cameras. People were already raising their glasses. Corinne watched Julian Prescott's face. He did not raise his glass. He did not smile. He looked like a man who had just been pushed off a ledge and was still falling. Felicity extended her hand toward him. "Julian, come up here, darling." He did not move. The room waited. The silence stretched into something uncomfortable. Corinne saw a few guests exchange glances. She saw a red-haired man near Julian lean in and whisper something urgent. Julian shook his head once, hard. Then he turned. He turned away from the stage, away from Felicity's outstretched hand, and moved through the crowd with long, fast strides. People stepped aside, confused. Corinne watched him coming closer, weaving past tables and guests, his face tight with something between panic and resolve. He was coming toward her. Corinne froze. She held the tray tighter. He was 10 feet away. Then 5. His eyes locked onto hers, and she saw in them a desperate, half-wild apology for something he had not yet done. "I'm sorry," he said. He took the tray from her hands and set it on the nearest table in one motion. Then his hand came to her waist, and his other hand touched her jaw, and before Corinne could speak or step back or understand what was happening, Julian Prescott kissed her. In front of 500 people. In front of Felicity Hargrove on that stage. In front of every camera phone in the room. His lips were warm and the kiss lasted 3 full seconds. Corinne's hands hung at her sides. She could hear the room implode around them, the gasps, the sharp intake of breath from the woman closest to them, the cascade of camera shutters, and somewhere far away, Felicity Hargrove's voice cutting through the noise like broken glass. Julian pulled back. His hand was still on her waist. He looked into Corinne's eyes and said, loudly enough for the nearest 50 people to hear, "My girlfriend is right here. She has been all along." Corinne stared at him. She had never seen this man before in her life. The tray she had set down slid off the edge of the table and hit the marble floor. 12 champagne glasses shattered. The sound cut through the ballroom like a gunshot. Everyone turned. Every phone was pointed at her. Felicity stood on the stage with her hands still extended, her face shifting from confusion to fury to something cold and controlled. Julian leaned close to Corinne's ear. "Please," he whispered. "Just go with it. I will explain everything. I am so sorry." Corinne felt her heart hammering against her ribs. She could feel the heat of the lights, the weight of 500 stairs, the champagne soaking through her shoes from the broken glasses on the floor. A photographer from Atlanta scene was already pushing through the crowd toward them. She looked at Julian Prescott's face. She saw fear. She saw shame. And underneath both, she saw a man who was genuinely, desperately trapped. She did not say a word. She turned, walked through the crowd, pushed through the service entrance, and stepped into the loading dock behind the hotel. The night air hit her like cold water. Her hands were shaking. Her lips were tingling. Her phone was already buzzing in her apron pocket. She pulled it out. Aunt Lorraine had texted, "Baby, why is your face all over the internet right now?" Corinne leaned against the brick wall and looked up at the Atlanta sky. She could still taste champagne on her lips, and it was not hers. What would you do if a complete stranger kissed you in front of 500 people and turned your entire life upside down? Drop your answer in the comments. And if you have not subscribed yet, do it now, because this story is just getting started. Inside the ballroom, Julian Prescott stood in the wreckage of 12 champagne glasses, surrounded by whispers, and realized he had just made the most reckless decision of his life. And it was already too late to take it back. Corinne's alarm went off at 5:15 in the morning, same as always. She lay on her narrow bed in the apartment she shared with her roommate, Tanya, and stared at the ceiling. The plaster had a crack running from the light fixture to the window. She had traced that crack every morning for 2 years. It looked like a river on a map, heading somewhere she could not follow. Her phone was on the nightstand. She picked it up and felt her stomach drop. 47 new notifications. Messages from numbers she did not recognize. 3 voicemails. Her name was trending on local Twitter alongside the words, "Billionaire," and "Caterer," and "Mystery Woman." Someone had already pulled her photo from the catering company's website. A blurry screenshot from the gala video showed Julian Prescott's hands on her waist, her face tilted up, her eyes wide with shock. The headline on Atlanta Scene's website read, "Prescott CEO stuns gala with mystery kiss." Who is she? Corinne deleted the notifications without reading them. She got out of bed, pulled on a cobalt blue t-shirt and jeans, and walked to the kitchen. The apartment was small. 2 bedrooms barely big enough for a bed and a dresser each, a kitchen with a stove that worked on 3 of 4 burners, and a living room dominated by Corinne's folding card table, which was covered with nursing school textbooks and a laptop held together with electrical tape. Tanya was already gone for her shift at the hospital where she worked as a receptionist. She had left a sticky note on the coffee pot, saw the video. "Girl. Call me." Corinne poured coffee and sat at the card table. She opened her pharmacology textbook to chapter 14. She had a test on Thursday. The words swam in front of her eyes. She kept thinking about his hand on her jaw. The way his thumb had barely touched her cheek. The way he had said, "I'm sorry," before he did it, like a man walking into a fire and apologizing to the fire for being flammable. Her phone rang. Aunt Lorraine. Good morning, Auntie. Don't you good morning me, Corinne Michelle. Lorraine's voice was equal parts worry and authority. I have been up since 4 o'clock watching that video. You want to tell me what happened? I don't fully know what happened, Corinne said. He just grabbed me. I didn't know who he was until after. Julian Prescott, Lorraine said. He's the richest man in Georgia and he kissed my niece in front of God and everybody. You didn't know him? No. And he hasn't called you? He doesn't have my number. Lorraine was quiet for a moment. Come to the kitchen early today. We need to talk about this before the phone starts ringing, because baby, the phone is going to start ringing. Corinne closed her textbook. She washed her mug, locked the apartment, and took the bus to her aunt's catering kitchen in a strip mall off Cascade Road. The sign out front read Lorraine's table in hand-painted letters, the paint peeling slightly at the edges. The kitchen was warm and smelled like onions and fresh bread. Lorraine was already dicing vegetables at the steel counter, her gray hair pulled back under a blue bandana. She looked up when Corinne walked in and studied her face the way she had been studying Corinne's face since the girl was 16 years old, motherless, scared, and standing on her doorstep with a suitcase. You all right? Lorraine asked. I'm fine. You're not fine. But you're tough, so we'll work with that. They worked side by side for an hour before Lorraine brought it up again. That man owes you an apology and an explanation. What he did was wrong, kissing you like that without your permission. I don't care how rich he is. Corinne nodded. She had been thinking the same thing all morning. But she had also been thinking about the look in his eyes. Not entitlement. Not carelessness. Fear. The same kind of fear she had seen in her father's eyes the day the police came to their house. She pushed that thought away. Across the city, in a glass-walled office on the 32nd floor of the Prescott Industries Tower in Midtown, Julian Prescott sat behind his desk and watched the same video on his computer screen. He had watched it 4 times. Each time, he focused on the woman's face at the moment he kissed her. The shock in her brown eyes. The way her hands stayed at her sides. The absolute stillness of her body, as if she had turned to stone. Dennis Keene stood on the other side of the desk, arms crossed, wire-rimmed glasses reflecting the screen. Her name is Corinne Bellamy, Dennis said. 27 years old. She works for a catering company owned by her aunt. She's a part-time nursing student at Atlanta Metropolitan. No social media presence to speak of. No public record of any kind. Julian closed the laptop. She looked terrified. She was terrified. You kissed a stranger on live camera. Julian stood and walked to the window. Atlanta spread out below him, morning traffic crawling along Peachtree Street. The office was modern and spare, a few framed photographs on a shelf, his parents, his daughter Olive, and one small photo of a woman with kind eyes and dark hair, turned slightly away from the camera. Meredith. She had died 3 years ago. Ovarian cancer, diagnosed late, gone within 8 months. Julian had watched her disappear in stages, her laugh going first, then her appetite, then her ability to walk to the garden, then her ability to hold Olive. The last thing she said to him was, "Don't let her forget me." He had not let Olive forget. But he had forgotten how to be anything other than a father and a CEO. He had built walls around himself so high that when Felicity Hargrove began circling, he had not seen her strategy until it was too late. Felicity had started appearing at every fundraiser, every board dinner, every charity event Prescott Industries sponsored. She was charming. She was connected. Her father, Gerald Hargrove, ran one of the largest private equity firms in the Southeast, and he had been suggesting a partnership between their companies for months. Felicity's presence at Julian's side became so constant that the society pages began referring to them as a couple. Julian had corrected the assumption privately, but never publicly, because he did not want the attention. That was his mistake. Last night, Felicity had used that silence against him. She had walked onto that stage and claimed him in front of 500 witnesses, and he had panicked, and he had done the only thing his panicked mind could think of to prove she was lying. He had kissed the nearest woman. "I need to find her," Julian said. "I need to apologize." Dennis pulled out his phone. "I have the address for the catering company. Lorraine's table, on Cascade Road." Julian picked up his jacket. He paused at the door and looked back at the photograph of Meredith. "This is a mess," he said. "Yes," Dennis said. "It is." Julian's daughter, Olive, was at home with her nanny. She was 5 years old and she had her mother's hazel eyes and her father's habit of going quiet when she was upset. She carried a stuffed rabbit named Biscuit everywhere, a rabbit Meredith had given her from a hospital gift shop during her last good week. Olive had not let go of it since. Julian thought about his daughter as he drove toward Cascade Road. He thought about the life he was giving her, a big house with too many empty rooms, a father who worked 14-hour days, a revolving door of nannies who meant well but could not fill the space her mother had left. He thought about the woman he had kissed. The woman who had walked away from him without a word, with champagne soaking through her shoes, and who had not sold her story to a single outlet by morning. He owed her more than an apology. He owed her the truth. Julian Prescott pulled into the strip mall parking lot on Cascade Road at 11 in the morning. He sat in his car for 2 full minutes before getting out. The car was a black sedan, understated for a man worth several $1 billion, but it still looked out of place between the dented pickup truck and the delivery van with a broken taillight. The strip mall held a nail salon, a tax preparation office, and Lorraine's table. The catering kitchen's front window had a handwritten menu board and a small shelf of homemade hot sauces for sale. Julian walked in. A bell chimed above the door. The kitchen was behind a service counter. He could see stainless steel tables, stacked sheet pans, and a woman in a blue bandana chopping herbs with the kind of speed that comes from decades of practice. Lorraine Bellamy looked up, and her knife stopped mid-cut. "Oh," she said. "So you do know where to find her." "Ms. Bellamy, I came to apologize." Julian stood at the counter with his hands at his sides. He did not lean on the counter. He did not try to smile. "What I did last night was wrong. I had no right to involve your niece in my problems." Lorraine set the knife down and wiped her hands on her apron. She studied him the way Corinne had described her studying everything, with careful, unhurried attention. "Corinne is in the back," Lorraine said. "But before you talk to her, you talk to me. What exactly are your problems, Mr. Prescott?" Julian told her. He stood in that small kitchen and explained the situation plainly: Felicity Hargrove's year-long pursuit, the society pages that had labeled them a couple, his failure to correct the narrative publicly, and Felicity's ambush on stage. He did not make excuses. He did not minimize what he had done. Lorraine listened without interrupting. When he finished, she said, "And what do you want from my niece now?" "Just to apologize. In person." Lorraine called toward the back. "Corey, come out here." Corinne came through the kitchen door drying her hands on a towel. She was wearing a green blouse with the sleeves rolled up, and her twists were pulled back from her face. She stopped when she saw Julian. Her expression did not change, but her hands went still on the towel. "Ms. Bellamy," Julian said. "Corinne. I came to say I'm sorry. What I did to you last night was inexcusable. I put you in a situation you didn't ask for, and I exposed you to public attention that you didn't deserve. I'm sorry." Corinne folded the towel and set it on the counter. "You kissed me in front of 500 people to get out of a situation with your girlfriend. She's not my girlfriend. She never was. That's the problem. She told the room we were engaged, and I panicked. So you grabbed the nearest stranger." "Yes. That was wrong. I know. They looked at each other across the counter. Lorraine watched from the kitchen doorway, arms crossed. Corinne said, "Your apology is accepted." "Is that everything?" Julian hesitated. This was the part he had rehearsed in the car, the part that made him feel like he was about to step off another ledge. But Dennis had been right that morning, Felicity would not stop. The public believed Corinne was his girlfriend now. Denying it would only invite more scrutiny on both of them, and it would give Felicity the opening to resume her campaign. "There's something else," Julian said. "And I understand if you say no." He told her. He explained that Felicity would not stop pursuing him until she believed someone else was in the picture. The media already thought Corinne was his girlfriend. If they pretended the relationship was real for 3 months, long enough for Felicity to move on and the public interest to fade, both of them could walk away cleanly. "In exchange," Julian said, "I would like to pay your remaining nursing school tuition. All of it. And I'd like to invest in your aunt's business. A proper expansion, new equipment, whatever she needs." The kitchen went quiet. Corinne looked at Lorraine. Lorraine's eyebrows were raised, but she did not speak. Corinne turned back to Julian. "You're asking me to lie. To everyone. I'm asking you to play a part. For 3 months. After that, we stage a quiet breakup, and you walk away with your degree paid for and your aunt's business on solid ground. And if I say no? Then I leave right now and I figure out another way to handle Felicity Hargrove. And I still pay for the damage to your reputation, because I caused it." Corinne looked at the folding towel on the counter. She thought about the pharmacology test on Thursday. She thought about the tuition bill that was already 3 weeks overdue. She thought about the letter from the financial aid office sitting in her backpack, the one that said her scholarship had been reduced due to budget cuts. She thought about Lorraine's kitchen, with its aging refrigerator that broke down every other month and the oven that had a dead zone on the left side. She thought about pride, and she thought about practicality, and she thought about what Lorraine had always told her: when somebody offers you a hand up, you don't slap it away to prove you can climb alone. 3 months, Corinne said. 3 months. Ground rules. You don't touch me without asking. You don't make decisions about my life without telling me. You don't introduce me to your daughter until I say I'm ready. And when the 3 months are over, you keep your word. Julian nodded. All of it. I promise. Corinne extended her hand. Julian shook it. His grip was firm and his palm was warm, and Corinne noticed for the first time that his eyes were the color of a winter sky. She let go of his hand quickly. Lorraine spoke from the kitchen doorway. "Mr. Prescott, you understand that if you hurt my niece, there is no amount of money in the world that will protect you from me." Julian looked at her. "I understand, Ms. Bellamy." "Good. Now would you like some cornbread? You look like you haven't had a home-cooked meal in a month." Julian blinked. "I would. Thank you." He sat at the small table by the window and ate cornbread with honey butter while Lorraine went back to her prep work and Corinne returned to the kitchen. Through the serving window, he could see her moving between the counter and the stove, efficient and focused. She caught him watching once and looked away. After he left, Lorraine came and stood beside Corinne at the prep station. "You sure about this?" Lorraine asked. "No," Corinne said. "But the tuition is due in 3 weeks and the scholarship isn't coming back. And your refrigerator died again last Tuesday." Lorraine put her arm around Corinne's shoulders. "Your mama would say you're being smart about a strange situation. My mama would say I'm being crazy. That too. But she'd be proud of you for it." Corinne smiled for the first time in 24 hours. It was a small, tired smile, but it was real. That evening, Julian called Dennis from his home office. "She agreed," Julian said. "And you're sure this is better than simply issuing a public statement denying Felicity's claim? A public statement would turn it into a war. Felicity would escalate. Her father would escalate. The board would start taking sides. This way, the story writes itself, I have a girlfriend, Felicity was wrong, and in 3 months it's over. Dennis was quiet for a long moment. Julian, I've known you for 8 years. You didn't just pick any woman in that room. You looked at her, and then you kissed her. I was panicking, Dennis. Sure. But you were panicking in her direction. Julian hung up before Dennis could say anything else. The Prescott estate sat behind a wrought iron gate on a tree-lined street in Tuxedo Park. The house was large but not showy, a stone and timber Georgian with ivy climbing the east wall and a wide front porch that looked like it had been designed for sitting and never used. Corinne stood at the front door on a Saturday morning, wearing a cobalt blue wrap dress and flats. Julian had sent a car for her, which she had declined. She took the bus to Buckhead and walked the last half-mile. She wanted the time to think. Julian opened the door himself. He was dressed casually for the first time she had seen, a grey Henley shirt and dark jeans. He looked younger without the suit. Also more tired. Come in, he said. Thank you for coming. The foyer was wide and bright, with hardwood floors and a staircase curving upward. It was clean in the way that expensive houses are clean, professionally maintained, but it felt hollow. There were no shoes by the door, no keys tossed on a side table, no evidence of a life being lived in a hurry. The only sign of a child was a pair of small pink rain boots tucked neatly beside the coat closet. Julian led her to the living room. I thought we'd go over some things today. Events coming up, people you'll need to know, how to handle questions from the press. All right. But first. He paused. My daughter is home. Her nanny has the morning off. I know you said you wanted to wait before meeting her, and I respect that. But she's in the next room, and I didn't want you to be surprised. Corinne nodded. She had thought about this all week. A 5-year-old girl who had lost her mother. A child who did not know that the woman in her father's house was pretending. Corinne had almost called Julian twice to say she was not ready. What's her name? Corinne asked. Olive. And how is she? Julian's face shifted, the small tightening around his eyes that Corinne was learning meant he was holding something back. She's quiet. She's been quiet for a long time. Since her mother died, she doesn't warm up to new people easily. The therapist says it's normal grief for her age, but... He did not finish the sentence. He did not need to. A sound came from the next room. Soft footsteps on hardwood. Then a small face appeared around the edge of the doorway. Olive Prescott was tiny. Light brown hair and 2 uneven pigtails that her father had clearly attempted himself. Hazel eyes, wide and watchful. She was wearing a yellow sundress with a grass stain on the hem, and she was clutching a worn stuffed rabbit with one missing eye. She looked at Corinne and did not move. Corinne felt something catch in her chest. She did not know this child, but she recognized the expression on her face. She had worn that same expression at 16, standing in her aunt's doorway, trying to figure out if the new place was safe. Corinne did not stand up. She did not crouch down or reach out her arms or say any of the bright, eager things adults say to children they are trying to win over. Instead, she looked at the stuffed rabbit. That's a nice rabbit, Corinne said. Her voice was calm and quiet. Does your rabbit have a name? Olive's eyes flickered. She held the rabbit a little tighter. My aunt has a cat named Pepper, Corinne said. Pepper only has one eye too. He walked into a screen door when he was a kitten. He's kind of clumsy, but he's very brave. A pause. Then, so quietly that Corinne almost missed it, Olive said, Biscuit. Biscuit, Corinne repeated. That's a good name. Is Biscuit brave? Olive looked down at the rabbit. She nodded. I bet Biscuit is very brave, Corinne said. Would Biscuit like to sit with us? Another pause. Then Olive took 3 small steps into the living room and sat on the floor near Corinne's feet, not quite beside her, but closer than she had been. She set Biscuit on her lap and stroked its ears. Julian stood in the doorway watching. His hands were in his pockets. He did not say anything. For 20 minutes, Corinne talked to Biscuit. She asked the rabbit about its favorite color, its favorite food, whether it liked rain or sunshine better. Olive answered for Biscuit in a whisper. Yellow. Carrots. Rain, because you can jump in puddles. By the time Julian brought out apple slices and peanut butter, Olive had moved close enough to lean against Corinne's knee. She was still not looking directly at Corinne, but her grip on Biscuit had loosened, and twice, almost accidentally, she smiled. Julian set the plate on the coffee table and sat down across from them. He watched his daughter lean against this stranger's knee, and something passed across his face that Corinne could not read. It was not gratitude, exactly. It was closer to grief. The grief of seeing your child reach for someone the way she used to reach for the person who was gone. They spent 2 hours going over the details of the arrangement. Julian showed her photographs of people she would meet, names she should know, events she should attend. He was thorough and patient. Corinne took notes in a small spiral notebook she had brought in her bag. Olive fell asleep on the rug with Biscuit tucked under her chin. The doorbell rang at 2 o'clock. Julian's expression changed instantly. "Stay here," he said. He went to the door. Corinne heard voices, Julian's, low and measured, and a woman's, high and sharp. She recognized the second voice from the gala stage. Felicity Hargrove appeared in the living room doorway before Julian could stop her. She was wearing a cream blazer and pearl earrings, and her eyes swept the room like a camera. They landed on Corinne sitting on the sofa, then moved to Olive sleeping on the rug, then back to Corinne. "Well," Felicity said. "You work fast." Julian stepped in front of her. "Felicity, you were not invited here. I wanted to talk. Privately." She did not take her eyes off Corinne. "But I see you're busy playing house." Corinne stood up. She met Felicity's gaze and held it. She did not speak. Felicity smiled. It was the kind of smile that had no warmth behind it. "I don't know who you are," she said to Corinne. "But I will." "Her name is Corinne," Julian said. "And I'd like you to leave." Felicity turned to Julian. For a moment, the mask slipped, and Corinne saw something raw underneath, not heartbreak, but frustration. The frustration of a plan being disrupted. "This isn't over," Felicity said. She turned and walked out. The front door closed behind her. Julian exhaled. He ran a hand over his face. "I'm sorry about that." "You don't need to apologize for her," Corinne said. "She's not your responsibility. She's my problem. And I made her your problem too." Corinne looked down at Olive, still asleep on the rug. Biscuit had slipped from the girl's arms, and Corinne bent down and tucked it back against her chest. "She's going to dig into my background," Corinne said quietly. "I know. Dennis is already monitoring it. And when she finds what she's looking for." Julian looked at her. "What is she going to find, Corinne?" Corinne straightened up. She met his eyes, and for a moment she considered telling him everything right there. But it was too soon. She barely knew this man. She was not ready to hand him the most painful chapter of her life as collateral. "Nothing I'm ashamed of," she said. Julian nodded. He did not push. When the car came to take her home, Corinne paused at the front door and looked back at the living room where Olive was still sleeping. The afternoon light fell through the window and caught the girl's hair, turning it gold. "She's a good kid," Corinne said. "She's the best thing I've ever done," Julian said. Corinne walked to the car. She got in the back seat this time without argument. She was tired, and the bus ride was long, and she had a test on Thursday. As the car pulled away, she turned and looked at the house through the rear window. Julian was standing on the porch, watching her go. He raised one hand in a small wave. Corinne did not wave back. But she almost did. The dress was red. Corinne stood in front of the full-length mirror in the guest bedroom of Julian's house and barely recognized herself. The dress was silk, sleeveless, fitted at the waist and flowing to the floor. Julian had sent it with a note, for the museum fundraiser. "If you don't like it, choose something else and send me the bill." She had almost sent it back on principle. But it was the most beautiful piece of clothing she had ever touched, and when she put it on, the fabric felt like water. She looked at herself. The red against her brown skin was striking. Her twists were pinned up, showing the line of her neck. She had borrowed earrings from Lorraine, small gold studs, nothing flashy. She did not look like a caterer. She did not look like a nursing student who rode the bus. She looked, for the first time in her life, like she belonged in a room full of people who had never ridden the bus at all. That scared her more than Felicity Hargrove did. The Atlanta Contemporary Art Museum fundraiser was smaller than the gala, maybe 200 people, but the crowd was more concentrated. These were the people who ran the city, developers, politicians, old money families, and the new tech wealth that had been reshaping Midtown for the past decade. Every one of them had seen the video from the gala, and every one of them was looking at Corinne when she walked in on Julian's arm. Julian leaned close. "You all right?" "I'm fine." "You're holding my arm like you're trying to break it." She loosened her grip. "Sorry." "Don't be. Just breathe." The first hour was a performance. Julian introduced her to people whose names she immediately forgot because they came too fast: board members, donors, the mayor's chief of staff, a retired judge, a woman who owned a chain of boutique hotels. Every introduction followed the same pattern: surprise, a quick glance at Corinne from head to toe, and then warmth. Real warmth. People liked her. She was not performing a character. She was herself, a woman who listened carefully, asked genuine questions, and remembered what people said. A magazine photographer asked if he could take their picture. Julian looked at Corinne, and she nodded. They stood together near a sculpture of a bronze horse, and the photographer said, "Beautiful couple." Corinne smiled because she was supposed to. But the smile, she realized later, was not forced. Halfway through the evening, Patricia Nolan appeared at Corinne's elbow. The Society columnist was sharp-eyed and direct. "Corinne Bellamy," Patricia said. "You're the mystery woman." "I'm not very mysterious." "That's exactly what makes you interesting. Every other woman Julian Prescott has been linked to came from money. You came from a catering kitchen. People love that story." "It's not a story," Corinne said. Patricia smiled. "Everything's a story. The question is who gets to tell it." She handed Corinne a business card. "If you ever want to tell yours, call me." She moved away into the crowd. Corinne slipped the card into her clutch and forgot about it. Later, she found herself on the museum's third-floor balcony, leaning against the railing, looking out at the Atlanta skyline. The city glittered. The air was cool for late spring, and she could hear the party muffled behind the glass doors. Julian appeared beside her. He had loosened his tie, and his hair was slightly out of place from running his hand through it, a habit she had begun to notice. "You were perfect in there," he said. "I wasn't trying to be perfect. I was trying not to trip. That's what made it perfect." She looked at him. The city lights reflected in his eyes, and he was looking at her with an expression she could not quite place. It was not the polite distance of their arrangement. It was something closer. "Julian, can I ask you something?" "Of course. When you kissed me at the gala, you were running from Felicity. But you could have just walked up to the microphone and said she was lying. Why didn't you?" He was quiet for a long time. A car horn sounded somewhere below them. "Because I was tired," he said. "I was tired of being careful and measured and strategic. I've been all of those things for 3 years, and I'm good at it, and it's killing me. When Felicity stood on that stage and tried to claim me like property, something broke. And instead of being the CEO who handles things correctly, I was just a man who wanted to prove her wrong in the most undeniable way I could think of. By kissing a stranger. By kissing you. The distinction sat between them like a lit match. Corinne turned back to the skyline. We should go back inside, she said. Corinne. Julian. She looked at him. Her voice was calm, but there was something underneath it. This is an arrangement. 3 months. I don't want to confuse what this is. He nodded slowly. You're right. I'm sorry. They went back inside. They spent the rest of the evening 3 feet apart, polite and professional, and the distance felt different than it had before. Heavier. In the car on the way home, Corinne sat in the back seat and replayed the balcony conversation in her head. By kissing you. Not by kissing a stranger. He had corrected her, and the correction meant something, and she did not want it to mean something, because meaning something was not part of the deal. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. This is Dennis Keene, Julian's assistant. I wanted to let you know that Felicity Hargrove has retained a private investigator named Arthur Kimball to look into your background. Julian asked me to tell you directly. Corinne stared at the text. Her thumb hovered over the screen. She typed back, thank you for telling me. Then she closed her eyes and leaned her head against the car window and tried not to think about what Arthur Kimball would find when he went digging. Because he would find it. They always did. 2 blocks from her apartment, she asked the driver to stop. She walked the rest of the way in the red dress and her flat shoes, carrying her heels in one hand. A man on the corner recognized her from the gala video and said, Hey, you're that girl. She walked past him without answering. In her apartment, she hung the red dress in her closet, which was the only place in the room where it didn't look absurd. She changed into sweatpants and a t-shirt and sat at her card table with her pharmacology textbook. She studied until 2 in the morning. She passed the test on Thursday. She told no one about the balcony. Across the city, in Julian's home office, Dennis pulled up a chair and set his laptop on the desk. There's something else, Dennis said. I've been tracking Felicity's movements for the past 2 weeks, like you asked. She's been visiting Prescott Industries headquarters after hours. 3 times. Julian looked up. After hours. Why? I don't know yet. But she had access through your guest badge system. The same badges we issue for charity events and board dinners. She's been using them to enter the building when the executive floor is empty. Pull the security footage. Already requested. It'll take a few days. Julian sat back in his chair. Something cold settled in his stomach, the feeling he got when numbers on a spreadsheet didn't add up and no one could explain why. Keep this between us for now, Julian said. Of course. 3 weeks into the arrangement, Corinne's world had split in 2. In one world, she was still the woman who woke at 5:15 and rode the bus to Lorraine's kitchen, chopped onions, prepped catering trays, and studied drug interactions on her phone during breaks. In the other world, she was the woman photographed arriving at the Prescott estate in a car with tinted windows, the woman whose face appeared in magazine columns next to the words, Julian Prescott's stunning new girlfriend. The 2 worlds were not supposed to overlap. But they did, in small ways, at unexpected times. Like the afternoon Olive asked Corinne to help with her school project. It was a Tuesday. Corinne had come to the house to go over the guest list for an upcoming technology conference. Julian had been called into an emergency board meeting, and the nanny was out sick. He had called Corinne from the car and said, I know this isn't part of the arrangement. But could you stay with Olive for a few hours? I'll have Dennis come by if you're not comfortable. I'll stay, Corinne said. She had not hesitated. Olive was sitting at the kitchen table with a large sheet of white paper, a box of crayons, and a worried expression. What are you working on? Corinne asked, sitting across from her. My family project. Ms. Patterson says draw your family. That sounds fun. Olive looked at the blank paper. She picked up a brown crayon, then put it down. Then picked it up again. I don't know who to draw. Corinne felt the weight of that sentence settle in her chest. She kept her voice even. Well, who's in your family? Daddy. And Biscuit. Biscuit counts. And Mama. Olive's voice dropped. But Mama's in heaven. She can still be in your picture, Corinne said. You can draw people who are in heaven. Ms. Patterson would want you to include everyone who matters to you. Olive considered this. She picked up the brown crayon and began to draw. She drew a tall figure with gray circles for eyes, that was Julian. She drew a small figure with pigtails, that was herself. She drew a figure with dark hair and angel wings, high in the corner of the paper, that was Meredith. Then she picked up a new crayon, a deep green one, and drew another figure. This figure had brown skin and twists in her hair. She was standing next to the tall figure and the small figure. She was holding the small figure's hand. Who's that? Corinne asked, though she already knew. That's you, Olive said. Corinne sat very still. She looked at the drawing. She looked at this child who had known her for 3 weeks and had already placed her inside the borders of her family. That's a beautiful drawing, Corinne said. Her voice was steady, but her eyes were not. When Julian came home that evening, Olive ran to show him the picture. He stood in the kitchen doorway, holding the drawing, and looked at the green figure standing beside his family. He looked at Corinne. She was putting on her jacket, getting ready to leave. She drew you, he said. I see that. Corinne. Julian. She zipped her jacket. Kids get attached. That's normal. It doesn't have to mean anything. But it did. They both knew it did. 2 nights later, Julian invited Corinne to dinner at the house. Not a planning session, not a strategy meeting. Just dinner. He cooked pasta with garlic and tomatoes, a recipe he said Meredith had taught him. Olive was already in bed. They sat at the kitchen table with 2 glasses of water and a bowl of pasta between them, and something about the simplicity of it, the steam rising between them, the quiet house, the way the kitchen light made everything look warm, broke through the wall they had both been building. Julian told her about Meredith. She was an art teacher, he said. Elementary school. She painted these murals in the school hallways, these big wild murals with animals and trees and kids flying through the sky. She said she wanted every kid who walked down the hall to believe they could fly. She sounds wonderful. She was. And when she got sick, she didn't stop painting. She painted in the hospital room. She painted on napkins when she couldn't sit up. The last thing she painted was a rabbit for Olive. Biscuit, Corinne said. Biscuit. Julian smiled, and the smile was fragile. She told me, before the end, that she didn't want me to be alone forever. She said Olive needed someone, and I needed someone, and that it was okay to let someone in. She made me promise. And have you? Not until now. The words hung in the kitchen. Julian looked at Corinne, and she felt the pull of it, the slow gravity of 2 people who had started pretending and somewhere along the way stopped. Corinne set her glass down. I need to tell you something, she said. Okay. My mother died when I was 16. Brain aneurysm. She was fine in the morning and gone by dinner. My father raised me alone after that. He was an accountant for a small logistics company in Decatur. He was good at his job, and he was good to me. She paused. Julian waited. When I was 20, my father was arrested. The owner of the company he worked for had been embezzling money for years. Millions. When it started to unravel, the owner needed someone to blame, and my father was the easiest target. He was the accountant. His name was on the records. They convicted him. He went to prison. Julian's face did not change, but his hands went still on the table. He served 4 years, Corinne said. A pro bono attorney took his case and found the evidence the original defense had missed. Bank transfers, timestamps, emails between the owner and his partner. My father was exonerated. He's been out for 2 years. He lives in Decatur. He works part-time at a hardware store. She looked at Julian. That's what Felicity's investigator is going to find. My father's arrest record. The conviction. Maybe even the mugshot. What he probably won't find, unless he looks very carefully, is the exoneration. Julian reached across the table and put his hand on hers. She did not pull away. Your father was innocent, Julian said. Yes. And you've been carrying this. It's not a burden. It's my life. Then you don't have to carry it alone. She looked at their hands on the table. His large, hers small, his pale, hers brown. The contrast was stark and somehow natural at the same time. Julian, she said. If we're not careful, this is going to become real. What if it already is? She stood up and took her plate to the sink. She washed it slowly. When she turned around, he was still sitting at the table, watching her. Good night, Julian, she said. Good night, Corinne. She walked out to the waiting car. She sat in the back seat and pressed her forehead against the cool window. She did not cry. But she was close. If this story is already pulling at your heart, take a second and subscribe. Share it with someone who believes in second chances. And leave a comment telling me, do you think Corinne should trust Julian with everything? 2 days later, in a glass-walled office on the 14th floor of a building in Buckhead, Arthur Kimball slid a manila folder across a desk to Felicity Hargrove. Warren Bellamy, he said. Her father. Convicted of embezzlement, 2018. Served 4 years at Phillips State Prison. Felicity opened the folder. She read the first page. A slow smile spread across her face. There's more, Kimball said. He was exonerated in 2022. A judge vacated the conviction. That won't be the part people remember, Felicity said. She closed the folder and picked up her phone. The invitation arrived on a Monday morning, slipped under the door of Lorraine's catering kitchen. Cream-colored card stock, embossed lettering, the Hargrove family crest pressed into the top corner. You are cordially invited to a ladies' charity luncheon, hosted by Felicity Hargrove, at the Peachtree Club, Wednesday at noon. Lorraine held the card between 2 fingers like it was something spoiled. You're not going. If I don't go, she wins, Corinne said. She gets to say I was intimidated. Baby, sometimes being intimidated is just being smart. Auntie, I have spent my whole adult life avoiding rooms where people might find out about Daddy. I'm tired of avoiding rooms. Lorraine looked at her for a long time. Then wear the blue dress. The one with the square neckline. And eat before you go, because the food at those places is tiny and you need your strength. Wednesday at noon, Corinne walked into the Peachtree Club in a sapphire blue dress and low heels. The dining room was bright, white tablecloths, tall windows, fresh flowers in crystal vases. 30 women were already seated. They were the wives and daughters of Atlanta's wealthiest families, women who sat on museum boards and hospital committees and rarely ate more than a salad in public. Felicity was at the head of the table in a pale silver blouse, her blonde hair swept back. She rose when Corinne entered and came to greet her with a hug that was all performance. Corinne, I'm so glad you could come. Ladies, this is Julian Prescott's girlfriend. Isn't she lovely? The women smiled politely. Corinne sat in the chair Felicity indicated, directly to her right, in full view of everyone. The luncheon proceeded normally for the first 45 minutes. A speaker from a children's hospital talked about their new wing. There was a silent auction. Corinne ate her salad and made small talk with the woman to her left, a pediatrician's wife named Helen who collected first-edition novels. Then Felicity stood to make her own remarks. "I want to talk about the importance of trust," Felicity said. "In our families, in our relationships, in our community. We trust the people around us to be honest about who they are." Corinne's hands went cold in her lap. When Julian introduced his new girlfriend to the world, we all fell in love with her story. A hard-working young woman, a caterer, putting herself through nursing school. It's the kind of story that makes you believe in the American dream. Felicity paused. Her eyes swept the table and settled on Corinne. "But I think it's important that we know the whole story. Because trust means transparency." She turned to the room. "Corinne Bellamy's father, Warren Bellamy, is a convicted felon. He was sent to prison for embezzlement. Stealing from his own employer. Millions of dollars." The room went silent. Every head turned to Corinne. Corinne sat perfectly still. Her heart was pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. She looked at Felicity's face and saw the satisfaction there, the careful cruelty of a woman who had planned this moment like a chess move. "I'm not saying this to be unkind," Felicity continued. "I'm saying it because Julian Prescott is an important man in this city, and the people around him should be honest about their backgrounds. We owe him that." A murmur moved through the room. The woman named Helen looked down at her plate. Two women at the far end of the table began whispering. Corinne folded her napkin. She placed it beside her plate. She stood up. Every eye followed her. "Thank you for the luncheon, Felicity," Corinne said. Her voice was even. She did not raise it. She did not let it shake. "And thank you for your concern about Julian's well-being. I'm sure he'll appreciate it." She pushed in her chair, picked up her clutch, and walked out of the dining room. She did not run. She did not look back. She walked through the foyer and past the doorman and down the stone steps to the street, and she kept walking until she reached the corner, where the trees blocked the view from the club's windows. Then she sat down on a bench and pressed her hands against her face. She did not cry. She pressed harder. She breathed through her fingers, slow and controlled, the way the therapist she had seen in college had taught her. 4 counts in, 4 counts hold, 4 counts out. Her phone rang. Julian. She let it ring 3 times before answering. "Dennis told me what happened," Julian said. His voice was tight. "Where are you?" "I'm sitting on a bench on Peachtree. I'm coming to get you." "No. Come to Lorraine's." "I need to be at Lorraine's." He was there in 20 minutes. Corinne was sitting at the small table by the window, still in the blue dress, a cup of tea untouched in front of her. Lorraine was in the kitchen, not cooking, just standing with her arms crossed, watching the door. Julian walked in. He looked at Corinne. He looked at the tea she had not touched. He sat down across from her. "Tell me everything," he said. So she did. She told him the full story, the parts she had skimmed before. How Warren Bellamy had worked for a logistics company called Greer Transport for 12 years. How the owner, a man named Dale Greer, had been siphoning money through shell accounts. How when the auditors closed in, Greer had doctored the records to make it look like Warren was responsible. How the court-appointed defense attorney had been overwhelmed and unprepared. How the jury convicted in less than a day. 4 years, Corinne said. He lost 4 years. He lost his house. He lost his savings. I was 20 years old, and I had to take out loans for school, and Auntie took me in, and Daddy sat in a cell for something he didn't do. Julian sat very still. A law student at Emory found the case through a wrongful conviction clinic, Corinne continued. She pulled the original bank records and found timestamps that proved the transfers were made from Greer's personal computer, not Daddy's workstation. She found emails between Greer and his business partner discussing how to handle the accountant. The conviction was vacated. Daddy came home. Where is he now? Decatur. He works at a hardware store 3 days a week. He goes to church on Sundays. He's rebuilding. She looked at Julian. He's the best man I've ever known, and Felicity Hargrove just told 30 of the most powerful women in Atlanta that he's a criminal. Julian took her hand. This time, she let him hold it. He was innocent, Julian said. The exoneration is public record. But Felicity didn't mention that part. No. She wouldn't. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, Corinne, I'm going to make this right. I don't know how yet, but I am going to make this right. Lorraine appeared in the kitchen doorway. She looked at Julian holding Corinne's hand. She looked at the set of his jaw and the anger in his eyes, anger not at Corinne but for her. Mr. Prescott, Lorraine said. Would you like some tea? Yes, please, he said. Thank you, Miss Bellamy. He stayed for an hour. He drank the tea. He listened while Corinne told him about visiting her father in prison, about the plastic chairs in the visiting room, about the way Warren always asked about her grades and never talked about himself. He listened while Lorraine told him about her sister, Corinne's mother, who had been the kind of woman who sang while she cooked and danced in the grocery store aisles. When Julian left, he stood at the door and said, I meant what I said. You have nothing to be ashamed of. And Felicity Hargrove is going to learn that. After he left, Lorraine sat down across from Corinne. That man is not pretending anymore, Lorraine said. Corinne looked at the door Julian had walked through. I know, she said quietly. Neither am I. Dennis Keene had not slept properly in 4 days. He had told Corinne this himself, sitting at the small desk in the corner of Julian's home office, his wire-rimmed glasses slightly crooked, a cold cup of coffee next to his laptop. Julian had asked him to brief Corinne directly, because Dennis was the one who had found it and Dennis was the one who could explain it clearly. 3 weeks ago, Dennis said, Julian asked me to look into why Felicity was visiting Prescott Industries headquarters after business hours. I pulled the security badge logs. Over the past 6 months, Felicity used a guest badge to enter the building 11 times between 9 at night and midnight. Corinne sat on the office sofa with her hands folded in her lap. Julian stood by the window, his back to the room, arms crossed. Every visit, Dennis continued, she accessed the executive floor. Specifically, the conference room adjacent to Julian's office. That room has a shared server terminal that stores board presentations, financial projections, and proprietary technology briefs. She was copying files. Corinne asked. Not directly. She was photographing screens. The security cameras in the hallway show her entering the conference room with her phone and leaving 15 to 20 minutes later. She never logged into the system, so there's no digital footprint on the server. But the images she captured are valuable. How valuable? Dennis looked at Julian. Julian did not turn from the window. Prescott Industries has a subsidiary called Prescott Dynamics, Dennis said. It develops automation technology for manufacturing. Last quarter, we finalized a proprietary compression algorithm that would cut production costs by 30% across the sector. That technology is worth, conservatively, $400 million. He opened a folder on his laptop and turned it so Corinne could see. A series of emails, redacted in parts, between accounts she did not recognize. 3 weeks after Felicity's first after-hours visit, Hargrove Capital, Gerald Hargrove's firm, made a lowball acquisition offer for Prescott Dynamics. The offer was 20% below market value. At the time, we thought it was just aggressive negotiating. Now we know it wasn't. They knew the technology was coming, Corinne said. They knew exactly what it was worth, and they were trying to buy it before the market found out. Every subsequent offer from Hargrove Capital tracked precisely with the information Felicity could have photographed during her visits. Julian turned from the window. His face was calm, but Corinne could see the muscle working in his jaw. Gerald Hargrove has been trying to acquire Prescott Dynamics for 18 months, Julian said. He started with the business pitch. When I said no, he sent Felicity. When Felicity couldn't get close enough through social channels, she started the relationship narrative. The engagement announcement at the gala was the final play. If the world believed we were together, she would have had permanent access to the company through me. The room was quiet. This is corporate espionage, Corinne said. Yes, Julian said. And you can prove it. Dennis has badge logs, security camera footage, and the correlation between the dates of Felicity's visits and the specifics of Hargrove Capital's acquisition offers. Our legal team has been reviewing everything for the past week. Thomas Gentry on the board has been briefed confidentially. Corinne thought about the luncheon. She thought about Felicity standing at the head of that table, talking about trust and transparency, while her father's company was stealing secrets from the man she claimed to love. She attacked me to distract you, Corinne said. Julian nodded. The luncheon was the same week Hargrove Capital submitted their latest offer. While I was dealing with the fallout from what she did to you, her father was pressuring the board to approve the acquisition. Did the board approve it? No. Thomas held them off. But it was close. Corinne stood up. She walked to the window and stood beside Julian, looking out at the darkening sky over Tuxedo Park. The trees were full and green, and somewhere in the house, she could hear Olive laughing at something on television, a sound that still surprised her every time she heard it. What are you going to do? She asked. I'm calling a special board meeting. Friday. And Felicity will be there. She and Gerald were both invited as part of the acquisition discussion. They think it's a negotiation session. Corinne looked at him. You want me there? I want you there. But only if you want to be. I'll be there. The rest of the week passed in a strange balance of the ordinary and the extraordinary. Corinne had her final exams for the nursing program approaching, and she spent every free hour studying. Julian, in a move that caught her off guard, sat with her at the kitchen table one evening and helped her review her clinical pharmacology notes. You know this material, Corinne said, looking at him across the table. I was pre-med at Emory, Julian said. Organic chemistry, biochemistry, pharmacology. I was going to be a doctor. What happened? My father died. Heart attack, sudden. I was 23. The company was in the middle of a major expansion, and the board needed a Prescott at the helm. My mother had already passed. There was no one else. So you gave up medical school to run a company. I gave up one life to save another. Do you regret it? He looked at the pharmacology textbook, then at Corinne. I used to. Every day. Then Olive was born, and I stopped regretting it because it gave me her. And now I'm sitting here, helping you study the same material I left behind, and it doesn't feel like regret anymore. It feels like the knowledge was waiting for a better reason. Corinne smiled. That's the most romantic thing anyone has ever said to me about pharmacokinetics. Julian laughed. It was a real laugh, full and sudden, and it changed his entire face. Corinne realized she had never heard him laugh before. Olive wandered into the kitchen in her pajamas, biscuit dangling from one hand. She looked at the textbook spread across the table. Are you doing homework? Olive asked Corinne. Yes. Big test next week. Olive climbed into the chair next to Corinne and set biscuit on the table. I'll help. Thank you, Olive. What do you know about drug absorption rates? Olive thought about it seriously. Biscuit says you should eat carrots. Biscuit is very wise. Julian watched them from across the table. Two people he loved sitting together in his kitchen, and neither of them knew the word he had just used in his own mind. Loved. Present tense. Not past. He looked at the photograph of Meredith on the shelf across the room. He thought about her last words to him. Don't let her forget me. And the other thing she had said, the thing he had never told anyone, it's okay to let someone in, Julian. Olive needs a mother. And you need a partner. Promise me you won't close the door. He had promised. He was keeping his promise. The Prescott Industries boardroom occupied the entire north side of the 32nd floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows, a long mahogany table, 12 leather chairs, and a view of Atlanta that made the city look like something you could hold in your hand. Corinne had been in this building once before, for a brief tour Julian had given her during the second week of their arrangement. She had looked at the boardroom through the glass wall and thought it looked like a place where people's futures were decided by strangers. Now she was inside it. She sat in a chair along the wall, not at the table. Julian had offered her a seat at the table, and she had declined. This was his company and his fight. She was there because he had asked her to be, and because she wanted to see it end. Julian sat at the head of the table in a charcoal suit and a white shirt. Dennis stood behind him with a laptop and a small stack of folders. Thomas Gentry, the board member who had known Julian's father, sat to Julian's right. He was a solid, calm presence, his dark hands folded on the table, his expression giving nothing away. The other board members filed in over the next 10 minutes. 7 of them, men and women in expensive clothes, carrying tablets and coffee cups, murmuring to each other about the acquisition agenda they had been told to expect. Gerald Hargrove arrived at 9:58. He was a tall man with silver hair and the kind of confidence that comes from never having been told no. He shook hands with 2 board members and took a seat at the far end of the table. Felicity arrived at 9:59. She was wearing a cream-colored suit and carrying a leather portfolio. She saw Corinne against the wall and paused for half a second, the faintest flicker of surprise, before taking the seat beside her father. Julian called the meeting to order. "Thank you all for coming on short notice," he said. "I know we were scheduled to discuss the acquisition offer from Hargrove Capital. We will. But first, there's another matter." Gerald leaned back in his chair, relaxed. Felicity opened her portfolio and uncapped a pen. "Dennis," Julian said. Dennis connected his laptop to the screen on the wall. The first image appeared, a security camera still, time-stamped 10:47 p.m., showing Felicity Hargrove walking through the executive floor hallway. Felicity's pen stopped moving. "Over the past 6 months," Julian said, "this building's security system has logged 11 unauthorized after-hours entries by Felicity Hargrove. Each entry occurred on the executive floor. Each entry included access to the conference room adjacent to my office, which houses a shared server terminal containing proprietary Prescott Industries data." He paused. The board members were looking at the screen. Gerald Hargrove's relaxed posture had not changed, but his eyes had. Dennis advanced to the next slide. A timeline, Felicity's visits on the left, Hargrove Capital's acquisition offers on the right. The dates aligned like teeth in a zipper. Every offer submitted by Hargrove Capital, Julian continued, contains specific knowledge of Prescott Dynamics proprietary technology, knowledge that was not publicly available and could only have been obtained from internal documents stored on that server. He looked at Gerald. The compression algorithm. The manufacturing cost projections. The partnership terms with the Dayton plant. All of it appeared in your offers within days of Felicity's visits. Gerald Hargrove sat forward. "Julian, I don't know what you're suggesting, but this is absurd. Felicity attends events in this building regularly. She's been a guest at charity functions, board dinners. Guest badges are issued routinely. Guest badges provide access to the lobby, the event spaces, and the restrooms," Dennis said, reading from his notes. "They do not provide access to the executive floor. Felicity's badge was modified to include executive floor access. We traced the modification to a request submitted under your name, Mr. Hargrove, 6 months ago, using credentials from a charity dinner RSVP." Gerald's face hardened. He turned to Felicity. Felicity was staring at the screen, her pen still in her hand, her expression locked. Thomas Gentry spoke for the first time. Julian, I've reviewed the evidence with outside counsel. The pattern is clear. This is corporate espionage. A murmur ran through the board members. One of them, a woman in a maroon blazer, set down her tablet and looked at Gerald with an expression that could have cut glass. Gerald stood up. This is a setup. You're retaliating because Felicity embarrassed your girlfriend at that luncheon. Julian did not raise his voice. This has nothing to do with the luncheon. The investigation began 3 weeks before the luncheon. The evidence speaks for itself. Felicity stood. She looked at Corinne, sitting quietly against the wall in a green blouse and dark slacks, and something shifted in her face. Not fear. Anger. The anger of someone who had been outmaneuvered and knew it. She's the fraud, Felicity said, pointing at Corinne. Your entire relationship is a fraud. She's a caterer you kissed to get out of a conversation. She's nobody. The room went quiet. Every board member, every assistant, every person in that room turned to look at Corinne. Corinne sat very still. She did not stand. She did not speak. She met Felicity's eyes and held them. Julian stood. He placed both hands on the mahogany table. Corinne Bellamy, he said, his voice steady and clear, is the most real person in this room. She is not my fake girlfriend. She hasn't been for a long time. He turned to Corinne. The boardroom, the cameras, the 7 board members, the Hargroves, all of it fell away, and it was just the two of them. Corinne, I love you, he said. That's not part of any deal. That's not strategy. I love you. The room was absolutely silent. Corinne looked at this man standing at the head of a boardroom table, in front of the people who controlled his company and his reputation, telling her he loved her. She thought about the gala, the kiss, the shattered champagne glasses, the 3 months that were supposed to be a performance. She thought about Olive's drawing. She thought about pharmacology notes and pasta with garlic and a stuffed rabbit named Biscuit. She stood up. She walked to the table. I love you too, she said. Thomas Gentry cleared his throat. Perhaps we should return to the matter at hand. Julian nodded. He looked at Gerald and Felicity. The board will vote on whether to pursue legal action against Hargrove Capital for corporate espionage. Additionally, federal authorities have been contacted. An investigation is underway. Gerald's face went pale. He turned to Felicity, and for the first time, Corinne saw something in his expression that looked like blame. Felicity stood rigid beside her father. Her portfolio was still open on the table, her pen uncapped, her notes half-written. All of her planning, all of her strategy, all of the careful construction of a year-long campaign had collapsed in 15 minutes. The board will vote now, Thomas said. The vote was unanimous. Security escorted Gerald and Felicity Hargrove from the building. Corinne watched from the window as they emerged onto the sidewalk 32 floors below, 2 small figures in expensive clothes, walking toward a black car. Julian came and stood beside her. It's over, he said. Not yet, Corinne said. But it's starting to be. He put his arm around her shoulders. She leaned into him. Dennis quietly left the room and closed the door behind him. Through the window, Atlanta spread out below them, wide and bright and full of people going about their ordinary lives. Somewhere in Decatur, Corinne's father was stacking lumber at a hardware store. Somewhere on Cascade Road, Lorraine was chopping onions. Somewhere in Tuxedo Park, Olive was at school, drawing pictures of her family. Corinne closed her eyes and breathed. 3 months later, on a warm Saturday morning in October, Corinne Bellamy sat in a folding chair in the gymnasium of Atlanta Metropolitan College and waited for her name to be called. The gymnasium smelled like floor polish and fresh flowers. The graduates sat in rows of metal chairs, wearing blue caps and gowns, holding programs that listed their names in small print. Corinne's name was on page 4. She had checked 3 times. In the bleachers, Aunt Lorraine sat in the 3rd row, wearing a bright green dress and holding a handmade sign that read "Go Corey" in gold glitter letters. Beside her sat Warren Bellamy, in a clean blue button-down shirt, his gray-templed hair neatly trimmed, his hands folded in his lap. He had not been inside an institutional building since his release. When Corinne had told him about the graduation, he had gone quiet for a long time and then said, "I wouldn't miss it." Julian sat on Warren's other side, in a navy blazer and no tie. Olive was on his lap, wearing a yellow dress with daisies on it. Biscuit was on Olive's lap, positioned to watch the ceremony. Bellamy, Corinne Michelle. She stood. She walked across the stage. The gymnasium was not large, and the applause was not thunderous, but when she looked at the bleachers, she saw 4 people on their feet. Lorraine with the glitter sign held high. Warren with tears on his face that he did not wipe. Julian clapping with both hands. And Olive, waving Biscuit in the air like a flag. Corinne took her diploma from the dean's hand. She looked out at the gymnasium, at the rows of folding chairs and the fluorescent lights and the cracked basketball court beneath the temporary stage. It was not a grand ballroom. There were no crystal chandeliers or champagne flutes. But it was the most important room she had ever stood in. She walked off the stage and went directly to the bleachers. Warren reached her first. He put his arms around his daughter and held her, and he said, "Your mama is so proud of you, baby. So proud." His voice broke on the second sentence, and Corinne held him tighter. Lorraine was next, wrapping both of them in her arms, the glitter sign crushed between them. "You did it. You did it, Corey." Then Julian, who stood a step back, giving the family their space. Corinne reached for his hand and pulled him forward. "Get in here," she said. He stepped into the circle. Olive squirmed between the adults and grabbed Corinne's gown. "You look like a blueberry," Olive said, looking at the blue cap and gown. "Thank you, Olive. That's the nicest thing anyone has said to me today." The reception was in the school cafeteria. Plastic cups of lemonade and sheet cake with blue frosting. Corinne introduced Julian to her classmates, who tried very hard not to stare and mostly failed. She introduced Warren to Julian properly. The 2 men shook hands by the lemonade table. Warren was 2 inches taller than Julian but seemed smaller, the way a man does when years of hardship have compressed him. "Mr. Bellamy," Julian said. "I'm glad to meet you." "Corinne has told me a great deal about you," Warren said. "She says you're a good man." "My daughter has good judgment, so I believe her." "I want you to know something," Julian said. "What Felicity Hargrove did, using your record against Corinne, that was wrong. And the fact that you were exonerated, the fact that you are innocent, should have been the only part of that story anyone heard." Warren looked at him. His eyes were the same deep brown as Corinne's. "Mr. Prescott, I learned a long time ago that the truth doesn't always speak as loud as the lie. But it speaks longer. And it speaks last." Julian nodded. "Yes, sir. It does." They stood together for a moment, 2 men who understood what it meant to lose something essential and keep going. Then Olive appeared between them, holding a plate of sheet cake in both hands. "Daddy, this cake has a flower on it. Can I have the flower?" "You can have the flower." "Can Biscuit have a flower too?" "Biscuit can have a flower too." Warren watched the little girl carry her cake back to the table where Lorraine was saving seats. He looked at Julian. "She's a sweet child," Warren said. "She's everything," Julian said. 3 weeks after the graduation, Julian called Corinne and asked her to meet him at the Grand Monarch Hotel. "Why the Grand Monarch?" Corinne asked. "Trust me." She put on a red dress. Not the same red dress from the museum fundraiser, which she had returned to Julian weeks ago despite his protests. This one she had bought herself, with the first paycheck from her new job as a registered nurse at Grady Memorial Hospital. It was a simpler dress, cotton instead of silk, but the red was just as vivid. The Grand Monarch's ballroom was empty. The chairs were stacked against the walls. The chandeliers were dimmed. The marble floor where 12 champagne glasses had shattered 5 months ago was clean and bare. Julian was standing in the center of the room. He was wearing a navy suit and no tie, and his hands were in his pockets, and he looked nervous in a way she had never seen before. "Julian, what is this? Come here." She walked across the empty ballroom. Her footsteps echoed. The room was enormous without the crowd, and the silence made it feel like a cathedral. She stopped in front of him. They were standing on the exact spot where he had kissed her. She knew because there was a small chip in the marble where her tray had hit the floor, and she could see it between her shoes. "This is where it started," Julian said. "This is where you grabbed a stranger and kissed her. This is where I found you." He took his hands out of his pockets. In his right hand was a small velvet box. "And this is where I want to ask you to stay." He opened the box. Inside was a ring, a simple diamond on a gold band. Not the kind of ring a billionaire was expected to give. The kind of ring a man gives when he has listened to the woman he loves and knows she does not want to be overwhelmed. "Corinne Michelle Bellamy," Julian said. "Will you marry me?" She looked at the ring. She looked at him. She looked at the empty ballroom where her life had changed in 3 seconds of panic and champagne and a stranger's lips on hers. "Yes," she said. He slid the ring onto her finger. It fit. She wondered when he had found out her size, and then she thought about Lorraine, who had been suspiciously cheerful on the phone that morning, and she understood. Julian kissed her. Not like the first time, desperate and afraid. This time it was slow, and certain, and real. From the doorway of the ballroom, a small figure in a yellow dress came running across the marble floor. "Did she say yes?" Olive shouted. Her voice echoed off the high ceiling. "She said yes," Julian called back. Olive ran into them at full speed, wrapping her arms around both their legs. Biscuit fell to the floor. Corinne picked up the rabbit and handed it back. "Welcome to the family, Biscuit," Corinne said. Behind Olive, Lorraine and Warren walked into the ballroom. Lorraine was crying and smiling at the same time. Warren stood a few steps back, his hands clasped in front of him, his face lit with the quiet, unshakable peace of a man who had lived long enough to see his daughter happy. Dennis appeared last, standing by the door with his phone, taking a photograph that no magazine would ever publish. Just a family, in an empty room, at the beginning of something good. In the weeks that followed, the pieces fell into their places. Lorraine's table expanded into a larger kitchen space in East Atlanta. The new space had a working oven, 2 commercial refrigerators, and enough room for the 4 additional staff members Lorraine hired from the neighborhood. The sign out front was hand-painted again, this time by a local artist Olive had chosen from a school art show. Warren moved into a small apartment closer to Corinne and Julian. He began volunteering with the wrongful conviction clinic at Emory Law School, the same clinic that had saved him. Once a month, he sat with families of the incarcerated and told them his story. He never raised his voice. He never spoke with bitterness. He just told the truth. Felicity and Gerald Hargrove were indicted by a federal grand jury on charges of corporate espionage and securities fraud. Gerald's assets were frozen pending trial. Felicity, stripped of the social standing she had spent her life building, was last seen leaving a federal courthouse in downtown Atlanta, flanked by attorneys, saying nothing. Patricia Nolan wrote a column about the case. The headline read, "The Truth Speaks Last." In the article, she told Corinne's story, the real one. The caterer who became a nurse. The daughter of an innocent man. The woman who walked into a world that was not built for her and made it better by being exactly who she was. Corinne did not read the article. Lorraine cut it out and pinned it to the corkboard in the new kitchen. On a Sunday evening in November, Corinne sat on the porch of the Tuxedo Park house. The trees had turned gold and amber, and the air smelled like wood smoke and the last of the summer grass. Julian was inside, reading Olive a bedtime story. Corinne could hear his voice through the window, low and steady, and Olive's occasional interruptions to correct him on the plot. She looked at the ring on her finger. She looked at the street, the iron gate, the ivy on the wall. She thought about her mother, who sang while she cooked. She thought about her father, who counted every blessing twice. She thought about Lorraine, who had opened her door and her kitchen and her heart without hesitation. She thought about Meredith Prescott, a woman she had never met, who had painted a rabbit for a little girl and told her husband it was okay to love again. The front door opened. Julian stepped onto the porch. He sat down beside her. "She's asleep," he said. "Which story?" "The one about the bear and the moon." "She says I read the bear's voice wrong." "You do read the bear's voice wrong." "I know." They sat together in the quiet. The porch light cast a warm circle around them. Somewhere in the house, Olive was sleeping with Biscuit tucked under her chin, dreaming about things that 5-year-olds dream about. "Julian," Corinne said. "Yes. Thank you for kissing me." He laughed. It was the same full, sudden laugh she had heard in the kitchen that night, the one that changed his entire face. "You're welcome," he said. "Thank you for not slapping me. I thought about it." "I know." She leaned her head against his shoulder. He put his arm around her. The city hummed beyond the trees. They stayed like that for a long time, on the porch of a house that was no longer too quiet, in a life that was no longer pretend, in a love that had started with a lie and ended with the truth. And the truth, as Warren Bellamy had said, speaks last.